Every night for 9 years, Andre Whitaker walked out to his front porch off Crandall Avenue and turned on the light. 98-cent bulbs, 2 at a time. A spare in the drawer, so the porch was never dark for a single night. The house behind it was worth maybe $48,000. The light was worth everything. It was the only address his son still knew by heart. The one thing the old bus driver could say without saying it. Come home. He did not know his son had driven past that porch more than once. His son did not know the light had never once gone out. On the 10th winter, at 5:52 on a Tuesday morning, a truck slowed in front of the house, and Andre's hands began to shake. Andre Whitaker drove a city bus for 31 years. The crosstown line mostly, the long one that ran east to west across the bottom of the city and back, 14 hours a route some days when they were short drivers. He knew that road the way a man knows the lines in his own hand. He knew which stops filled at 6:10 with women in scrubs heading to the hospital shift, and which filled at 3 with kids let out of school, loud and elbowing, and he knew the old men who rode the loop twice just to be warm and have somewhere to be. He learned their names. That was the thing about Andre. He learned everybody's name. His mother had come up from Selma, Alabama, in 1961, 17 years old, with a cardboard suitcase and a cousin's address in Cleveland written on the inside of her wrist in ink so she wouldn't lose it. She raised Andre on the east side in 3 rented rooms, and she raised him on 2 rules. You speak to people, and you don't take what you didn't earn. She said the first one was manners and the second one was pride, and she said a man who had nothing else could still have both free of charge. Andre carried both onto that bus every morning for 31 years. He said good morning to every soul who climbed his steps. He gave transfers to people who'd lost theirs and waved off the quarter. He never once called in the till short, because the difference always came out of his own pocket before it came out of the city's. There was a woman who rode his bus for 6 years, and Andre never knew her last name. She got on at the stop by the dialysis center, 3 mornings a week, slow, holding the rail with both hands, and she paid in nickels and dimes counted out of a coin purse while the whole bus waited, and some mornings she was 4 or 5 short. Andre learned, without ever discussing it, to look out his window at interestedly those moments, to find something very interesting happening on the sidewalk, until he heard her settle into the seat behind him. He'd cover the difference at the end of his shift out of the cup of change he kept in the fare box. A few dollars a week for 31 years, for people he would look out the window so as not to embarrass. Nobody knew about the cup. Not the city, not Renee, not the supervisors who'd have written him up for it. It was between Andre and the window. His mother had told him once that the only kindness worth anything is the kind nobody can pay you back for, and nobody sees you do, because that's the only kind that isn't really about you. He had carried that the way he carried her other 2 rules, quietly, all the way down the line. When the woman with the coin purse stopped riding, one winter, Andre drove past the dialysis stop for a week looking for her, the way he would later watch every young man who climbed his steps. She never came back. He never found out her name or what happened to her. He just kept the cup full anyway, for whoever came next, because that was the point of the cup. He made $24.40 an hour at the end, and he and Renee made it stretch the way you stretch a single chicken into a week. They bought the house on Crandall in 1989 for $19,000, and they paid it off the spring. Isaiah turned 11, and Renee cried at the kitchen table, holding the last payment book like it was a diploma. They had 1 child. They'd wanted more, and the more never came, and so everything they had, every drop of it, went into Isaiah. Renee was the warm one. Andre was the steady one. She sang in the choir at Mount Carmel Baptist, 3 blocks over alto, loud enough that people 2 pews up would turn and smile. She made a sweet potato pie that grown men talked about for a year, and on the 2nd Sunday of every month she made 4 of them and walked 2 over to Miss Ruthie next door and the shut-ins down the street. Because, she said, A pie that only feeds your own family is just a pie, but a pie you carry somewhere is a visit. She kept a satin scarf on the bedpost and tied her hair before sleep, and she kept the house full of gospel coming out of the kitchen radio so steady that to this day Andre couldn't hear the first 8 bars of "His Eye is on the Sparrow" without having to sit down. She was the one who got under Isaiah's skin in the good way. When the boy was 9 and came home from school with his fists balled up because a teacher had called him slow, it was Renee who sat him down at the kitchen table with a slice of pie and a piece of paper and said, "Baby, let me tell you something about your hands." She'd watched him take apart the toaster that summer and put it back so it worked better than before, and she made him hold his own hands up in front of his face and look at them. "Slow is just a word people use when they're moving too fast to see you," she told him. "You take your time. You always took your time. Your daddy's the same way. Y'all see the whole thing before you touch it. That's not slow. That's careful. And careful is how you keep what matters." Isaiah was 40 before he understood she had been right, and by then she'd been gone 17 years. And the only person left who could have told her so was the father he hadn't spoken to. That was the trouble with the 2 men Renee left behind. They were both careful. They both saw the whole thing before they touched it. And when she died, the one thing neither of them could bring himself to touch was the other. She got sick the winter Isaiah was 23. It went fast, the way it sometimes does, 4 months from the word cancer to the funeral at Mount Carmel, where the alto section sang her favorite and broke down halfway, and Andre held the front pew rail with both hands and did not let himself fall. He was 49 the day his wife stopped being a fact of his mourning and became a thing he had to survive. And then there were 2 of them in the house, a father and a grown son, both of them swallowing it the same wrong way, both of them too much alike to say a single true thing about the woman they had lost. Andre dealt with grief the only way he knew. He got up. He put on the uniform. He drove the route. He believed, the way his mother had believed, that you carry it by carrying on, that the work is the prayer, that a man does not sit down inside his sorrow because the bus does not drive itself. So every morning at 4:45 he was up, and every night he was steady, and not once in those months did he know how to walk into his son's room and put a hand on the back of that boy's neck and say, "I miss her too, and I am drowning, and I don't know how to do this without her either." Isaiah grieved. Loud. He stopped going to his classes at the community college. He came in at 3 in the morning. He quit the job at the auto shop where he'd been apprenticing, the work he was actually good at, the only thing that had lit him up since his mother got sick. And Andre, frightened and clumsy and grieving in his own locked-down way, did the thing fathers do when they are scared for a son and have no language for it. He got hard. He got short. He talked about responsibility and about what his mother would have said and about how a man does not fall apart, and every word of it landed on Isaiah like a door closing. It came to a head on a Sunday night 9 years ago. The details did not matter much later, the way the details of the worst nights never do. There was a bill Isaiah hadn't paid and a promise he hadn't kept and a beer on his breath at the kitchen table, and Andre, who had been holding the whole world together with his jaw clenched for 2 years, finally cracked open at the seam. He said a thing. He has never repeated it to a living person, and he has repeated it to himself 10,000 times. The shape of it was, "Your mother would be ashamed of what you've turned into." And then, worse, the part he could not take back. "Maybe it's a good thing she isn't here to see it." Isaiah did not yell. That was the thing Andre couldn't forgive himself for. His son just got very quiet and looked at him for a long time and said, he went. In the morning before Andre's alarm, before the route, the boy was gone. A duffel bag, his good coat, the photo of Renee from the hall table that left a clean rectangle in the dust. No note. He was 24 years old. That was the last time Andre Whitaker saw his. He did look for him, those first months, in the clumsy ways a proud man looks for something he is ashamed of having lost. He called the auto shop where Isaiah had apprenticed, and the owner said the boy hadn't been by. He drove past 2 or 3 places downtown, where young men without anywhere to be sometimes ended up, slow, in the Buick, scanning faces, hating himself for the small mean hope that he wouldn't find his son in any of them, and the larger truer fear that he would. He asked at Mount Carmel, quietly, after service, and the pastor said he'd keep an ear out, and Miss Ruthie said she'd seen a card once, a postcard. No, she wasn't sure. There was no card. There was nothing. A grown man can disappear into a country this size and leave no edge to catch a hand on, and Isaiah, who had learned carefulness at his mother's table, was careful even in his leaving. The first year, Andre told himself the boy would call when he ran out of money. He didn't. The second year, Andre drove the route and watched every young man who climbed his steps, half hoping, and it was never him. By the third year, he had stopped expecting and started waiting, which is a different and longer thing. He rarets at 61 with a pension of $1,900 a month and a pin for 31 years of service that he put in a drawer and never looked at, because a pin is for a man who has somewhere to wear it. And somewhere in there he started leaving the porch light on. He could not have told you the exact night it began. It was not a decision so much as a thing his hands started doing on the way to bed. The reasoning, when he let himself look at it, was simple and a little crazy, and he knew it. If the boy ever came back, he would come at night. A man too ashamed to face his father would come in the dark. And a man coming home in the dark needs to see that the porch is lit, that the house is still standing, that he is still wanted. So Andre kept the bulb burning. 98 cents at a time, 9 years. Miss Ruthie next door, who was 81 and missed nothing, told him once over the fence that he was wasting his light bill on foolishness. Andre said, "Maybe so." She looked at him a while and then she said, softer, "You leave it on then, baby. You leave it on long as you need to." And after that she never said another word about it, and some nights Andre noticed her own porch light came on too, on the side that faced his, like she was keeping him company in it. There was one more thing. Every year in the middle of March, around the time of Renee's birthday, a money order came in the mail. $300, no letter, no return address. A money order, the kind you buy with cash so no name attaches to it, made out to Andre Whitaker, postmarked from a different city each time. The first year it came, he stood in the kitchen, holding for a long while, certain it was a mistake, a clerical thing, a windfall sent to the wrong house. He didn't cash it. He didn't know why he didn't cash it. He put it in the King Edward cigar box on the closet shelf where Renee used to keep buttons. The second March, another one came. $300. No name. By the 9th March, there were 9 of them in that box, $2,700 he had never spent and never understood, folded under a rubber band, and on the nights when the waiting got too heavy, Andre would take the box down and hold the stack and try to read the postmarks, like they were a language someone had almost taught him. Memphis, Columbus, Gary, Detroit. A man drifting was all he could make of it, a man drifting and, for some reason he could not name, thinking once a year of an old fool on Crandall Avenue. He never let himself finish the thought all the way. He was afraid of how much he wanted it to be true. He had a way of sitting with the box that he'd have been embarrassed to have anyone see. He'd put it on the kitchen table under the one light, and he'd take the money orders out one at a time and lay them in a row, oldest to newest, left to right, and he'd look at the dates and the cities and try to draw a man out of them the way you'd draw a face from a description. Whoever it was had been in Memphis the first year and Gary the second, far down and far west, and then for the last several years the postmark said Columbus. Columbus, Columbus, the same city, which meant whoever it was had stopped drifting, had found somewhere to stand. Some nights Andre let himself believe that was a good sign about a person he refused to name. Some nights he put the orders back in the box too fast, like a man closing a door on a draft, because the wanting got to be more than he could carry to bed. Then he'd turn off the kitchen light and go out and check the porch every night, and the bulb would be burning. and he'd tell himself it was burning for a stranger who sent money, because that was easier than telling himself the truth. That was the porch, and the man on it, and the light, and the box. Now the trouble. It came the way trouble comes to old men who have always paid their way, in an envelope, in language built so that he could not understand it. The first letter from the county he set aside, because the front of it said Final Norder, and he was certain a man who had never owed anyone anything could not possibly be receiving a final notice for anything. The second one he opened. He read it 3 times, standing at the kitchen counter with his reading glasses pushed up his nose. And the more he read, the less he understood. And that was the part that frightened him most. He had driven a 14-hour route. He had counted a till to the penny in the dark. He was not a stupid man. But the letter was not written for a man like him to understand. It was written for the people who write letters. What it came down to, when he finally drove to the county building downtown and stood in a line for 50 minutes, and a tired young woman behind glass explained it to him, was this: he owed back property taxes. 2 years of them. The bill on the house had crept up while he wasn't watching, reassessed, and the escrow he used to have through the bank had ended when he paid the place off in 2001. And the bill had started coming to him directly, and somewhere in the fog of those waiting years, a payment had been missed, and then another, and the penalties had stacked on the penalties. And now the number at the bottom of the page was $3,100 and change. "And if I can't pay it all at once?" he asked. The young woman, who was not unkind, who was just one person behind one window with 300 people behind him, told him the truth without softening it, because she didn't have the time to soften it. If the taxes stayed delinquent, the county could sell the lien on his house. A private company could buy the right to that debt, and after that ran its course, after the redemption window closed, a man could lose his home over $3,000 he couldn't gather fast enough. She slid a pamphlet under the glass. She said there were programs. She said he should talk to somebody. She called the next number. Andre drove home in his old Buick with the pamphlet on the seat beside him. He did not cry because he had taught himself a long time ago not to cry where it would do no good. But at the stoplight on Superior, he sat with both hands on the wheel and looked at the porch of his own life from the outside. For the first time, and what he saw was a 67-year-old man with $1,900 a month and 31 years of service to a city that was now going to take the one house his son knew how to find. That was the cruelty of it, and it had no villain in it, and that was the worst kind of cruelty there is. Nobody hated Andre Whitaker. No one had wronged him. The young woman behind the glass had been doing her job. The penalties had stacked the way water ducts behind a clog, indifferent, automatic. The system did not know that the light on that porch was a love letter 9 years long. The system saw a parcel number and a delinquent balance. And a private firm 3 counties over, Halstead Leon Holdings, which existed only as a name on letterhead and a model in a spreadsheet, was already running the numbers on parcels exactly like his, because there is always someone whose business is the patience of old men who can't pay. He had $2,700 in a cigar box. He did the math at the kitchen table, the way his mother had taught him to do math, slow and out loud, and the answer was that the money he had been refusing to touch for 9 years, the money sent by a hand he wouldn't let himself name, was $440 short of saving the house. And even if he cashed it, even if he gave up the only proof he had that someone out there still thought of him in March, it would not be enough. So he did not cash it. He put the box back on the shelf. He went out to the porch that night the way he did every night, in the cold off the lake, and he changed the bulb that had finally burned out after 4 months. And he screwed in the spare, and the light came on, soft and yellow and useless, over a house he was about to lose. And he stood there a while in the cold, an old man under his own porch lights, and he said, not loud, the way you say a thing you have given up expecting an answer to. "I'm sorry, see, son, I had a place for you, I almost held on to it." What Andre did not know, what he could not have known, was how close the answer had already come, more than once, and turned around in the dark. 3 years before, on a night in October, a man had driven a long way to sit in a car across the street from that porch, and could not make himself get out. He had parked the truck under the dead streetlight at the corner of Crandall, where the shadow was, and he had sat with the engine off, and his hands on the wheel, and looked at the house he grew up in. The rosebush was still there, wild and unpruned the way it got after his mother died. The gutter still sagged on the left, and the porch light was on. He had told himself, the whole drive up from Columbus, that the light would be off, that the old man would have given up by now, would have moved, would have died even, and that he would find a dark house with somebody else's car in the drive, and that this would settle it, would let him stop. Instead, the light was on. It had been on for him for 6 years, and he was looking right at it, and he could not move. He sat there 40 minutes. He watched the front room light go dark at 10:40, the way it always had, his father going up to bed. He thought about every way the next 60 seconds could go if he crossed the street and knocked. He thought about the thing his father had said, which he had carried in his chest like a stone for 6 years. And he thought about the things he had become since, the years he'd spent low and the slow climb back, the work he'd found in a body shop in Columbus, where the owner, an old man himself, had looked at the way Isaiah's hands moved over an engine and hired him on the spot, and never once asked where he'd come from. He thought about how he was, finally, barely, somebody his mother might have recognized again. And he could not square that with walking up those steps, because the boy who left was the boy who'd been told his mother would be ashamed, and that boy did not get to come back until he was sure, dead sure, that he was no longer ashamed of himself. He wasn't sure yet. So he had no right to the porch. He started the truck. He drove around the block once, slow, past Mount Carmel where his mother had sung, past the corner store where they bought the bulbs, and then he got on the highway south and drove 4 hours back to Columbus and did not sleep. That March, like every March, he walked into a check-cashing place and bought a money order for $300, made it out to Andre Whitaker, and mailed it with no name, the way he had for years, because it was the only sentence he knew how to send. It meant, "I'm still here." It meant, "I haven't forgotten her birthday." It meant the only "I'm sorry" he could not yet say to his father's face. He did not know his father never cashed them. He did not know the old man kept them in a cigar box and held them like a hand he was afraid to take. He did not know the porch light cost 98 cents and ran on nothing but waiting. Each of them, for 9 years, had been sending the same message into the same dark. And each of them was certain it had gone unanswered. And they were both wrong in exactly the same way, and that is the loneliest arithmetic there is. The fall before the 10th winter, the old man who owned the body shop in Columbus passed and left the business, against everyone's expectation, to the quiet mechanic who'd shown up 9 years before, with no references and the best hands he'd ever seen. Isaiah Whitaker, 33 years old, found himself a man with a key to his own shop, a steady name, a small savings account, and a truck that ran clean because he'd built the engine himself. And he found himself, for the first time in 9 years, no longer ashamed. He held that feeling for 3 weeks before he understood what it meant, and what it required of him, and how late it might already be. Then one Monday night he closed the shop early. He didn't pack a bag. He just got in the truck and drove north on the highway. He knew by heart now, up toward the lake, toward a street called Crandall and a house with a sagging gutter. And he told himself the whole way that the light would surely be off this time. And he did not believe himself. He turned off the highway a little after 4 in the morning, and the dead street light at the corner came into view. The same corner, the same shadow he'd hidden in 3 years before. And he did the same thing he'd done then. He stopped, he cut the engine, he sat. Because beyond the dead light, soft and yellow and impossible, still burning at 4 in the morning, after 9 years, the porch light was on. He sat at that corner for over an hour. He watched the dark front window and knew his father was somewhere behind it, awake or asleep. Now, older than the picture Isaiah carried of him. Everything in him that had run for 9 years told him to start the truck and go, the way he'd gone before, to mail another $300 in March, and call it love, and call it enough. It had never been enough, he knew that now. A money order is a thing you send when you can't bear to be seen, and he was tired, bone tired, of not being seen by the one man whose seeing he had spent his whole life trying to earn. His mother had told him once that careful was how you keep what matters. He had been careful for 9 years, and it had kept him nothing but distance. There is a point where careful becomes cowardice, wearing careful's coat. And at 5:51 in the morning, with the frost coming down on the windshield and the porch light burning steady through it, Isaiah Whitaker finally saw the difference. He started the truck. He did not drive around the block. He pulled across Crandall Avenue, slow, and turned into the gravel drive of the house he grew up in, and at 5:52 the headlights swung across the frost and lit the porch and the rose bush and the door, and he put it in park and he let the engine go quiet. Inside the house, an old man who could not sleep heard it. Andre had been sitting in the dark of the front room since 4, in Renee's chair, the way he did most mornings now that sleep came in pieces. He heard the engine slow. He heard it stop.
For a long moment he did not move.
Because over 9 years he had heard 100 engines slow on Crandall Avenue, and not one of them had ever been for him. And he had learned that hope is a thing you have to ration, or it will bankrupt you. But this one did not pull away. He stood. His knee caught, the way it did, and he held the back of the chair until it let go. He crossed to the window and moved the curtain with 2 fingers, the way you check a thing you are afraid to look at directly. A truck. Dark, clean, idling steam in the cold. And a man getting out of it, slow, the way you get out of a vehicle when you are not yet sure you are going to stay. The man stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, in the wash of the yellow light, and looked up at it. Andre's hand went to the doorknob before his mind had finished the thought. He had run this morning 10,000 times, and in all 10,000 he had been calm, had been ready, had known what to say. He opened the door and the cold came in, and his breath left him all at once, because the calm was a lie he had been telling himself. And the man at the bottom of the steps was his son, 9 years older, broader through the shoulders. A man's face now where a boy's had been, his mother's mouth, his mother's exact way of holding still when his heart was loud. They looked at each other across 9 years and a set of porch steps, and neither one of them could find the first word, because the first word was the whole weight of it. It was Isaiah who finally spoke, and what he said's not what either over the door and expected. He looked up at the bulb burning over the door, and he said, "Look, rough. You kept it on. Every night. I drove by once, 3 years ago." Isaiah's jaw worked. I sat right there, nodded at the dead streetlight on the corner. Couldn't make myself come up, and the light was on then, too. I told myself it was just on. I told myself you'd forgotten to turn it off. I never forgot. I never once forgot. And then the old man who had not let himself fall apart in 9 years, who had held a pew rail with both hands at his wife's funeral and not gone down, came down the steps in his housecoat in the February cold and put his arms around his 33-year-old son, and held on the way a drowning man holds the thing that floats. Isaiah's face went into his father's shoulder. Neither of them said anything for a while. The light burned over them. Somewhere down the block Miss Roost's porch light was already on, the way it always was on the side that faced theirs, an old woman keeping company with a vigil she'd never been told the meaning of. They sat at the kitchen table as the sky went gray over the lake. Andre put coffee on out of habit, his hands not steady enough to be trusted with much else. The radio was off. The house was very quiet, and in that quiet the 9 years came out of both of them, not all at once, in pieces, the way the truth comes when it has been held too long. Isaiah told his father where he'd been. The bad first years he didn't dress up, because he'd promised himself on the drive up that he would not come back wearing a story. He drifted. Memphis a while. Gary, 2 winters he didn't like to talk about. He'd done work that didn't last, and work he wasn't proud of, and then in Columbus, he'd walked into a body shop looking for a day's pay, and an old man named Carl, who owned the place and trusted almost no one, had watched him take apart a transmission and put it back better than he'd found it, and had hired him on the spot. Carl never asked where Isaiah came from. Carl just gave him a bay and a name on the wall, and, slowly, over 9 years, a reason to stand up straight again. Isaiah had stayed. He'd gotten good. He'd gotten steady. He passed in the fall, Isaiah said. Carl, he left me the shop, no kids, just left it to me. He turned his coffee cup a quarter turn on the table, a small, precise motion, a mechanic's hands at rest. And I'm sitting there with the keys to my own shop, and I'm 33, and for the first time since I left this house, I'm not ashamed of who I am. He looked up. And I realized I'd been waiting for that, to stop being ashamed. Before I'd let myself come back, like I had to earn the right to knock on the door. Andre had to look at the table. I'm the one should be ashamed, he said. What I said to you that night about your mother. About her being. He could not finish it even now. There is no shame you could have carried that would come close. I have prayed on that sentence for 9 years, son. I'd give the rest of my life to take it back. I know you would, Isaiah said. I've known that for a long time. And then, quieter, I didn't mail those for 9 years to a man I thought meant it. Andre went very still. Mailed? What? Isaiah looked at him, and a small confusion came into his face. The money orders, he said. Every March. Mama's birthday. I sent. He stopped. He read his father's face. You didn't know they were from me. The old man stood up. His chair scraped the floor. He went to the hall closet and he took down the King Edward cigar box off the high shelf, the box that used to hold Renee's buttons, and he set it on the kitchen table in front of his son and he opened it. 9 money orders, folded under a rubber band. $300 apiece. Memphis, Gary, Columbus. Columbus. The later ones, all of them, the years he'd been still. Andre said, I didn't know who they were from. I told myself it was somebody drifting. I told myself. His voice broke off the rails. I was afraid to hope it was you, so I just kept them. 9 years. I held on to them like that was holding on to you. Isaiah looked at his own 9 years sitting in his mother's button box, untouched, $2,700 his father had refused to spend, because spending it would have meant admitting he'd given up on what it might mean, and the thing in the room then was bigger than either of them, because they understood at the same moment what they had been doing. For 9 years a father had been leaving a light on in the dark, certain no one was coming. For 9 years a son had been mailing the same wordless sentence into the dark, certain no one was reading it. Each one's faith had landed exactly where it was meant to land, and neither had known, and the not knowing was the only thing that had been keeping them apart. And that was when Andre Whitaker cried, not the careful tears a man allows himself, the other kind. He sat down hard in the kitchen chair and put both hands over face, and his shoulders went, and 9 years of carrying it alone broke open in his own kitchen with the sky going pink over Lake Erie. Isaiah came around the table and put his hand on the back of his father's neck, the exact gesture his father had never known how to give him the winter his mother died. And he held it there, and he said, I'm here, Pop. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. It was the first time the old man had wept all the way through since the morning he buried his wife, the wall he'd built to survive it. Get up, put on the uniform, drive the route, do not sit down inside your sorrow. Came down at last, and what was behind it was not weakness. It was 9 years of love with nowhere to go, finally finding the door. When it passed, when they had both come back to themselves, Andre wiped his face with the heel of his hand and told his son the other day. The letters from the county, the number at the bottom of the page. The window behind the glass downtown and the pamphlet on the seat of the Buick. He told it plain, the way his mother had taught him to tell hard things, and at the end of it he said, "I'm going to lose the son, the one you found your way back to. I held it 9 years, and I'm going to lose it over $3,000 I can't put my hands on fast enough." Here is the part where, in a smaller story, the son would have taken out a checkbook. Isaiah didn't. He went out to the truck and came back with a folder, because he was a man who kept his papers in order now, and he sat down at the kitchen table, and he said, "Show me the letters. All of them. Don't leave any in a drawer because you didn't like the look of it." They spread them out under the kitchen light, and Isaiah, who had spent 9 years learning to read the things that intimidate working people, the lien on a salvage title, the fine print on a parts contract, the language built so a man can't understand it. Read them the way he read an engine, one system at a time, out loud, until his father understood them too. "This first one," he said, smoothing the final Nort flat with the side of his hand. "This isn't even the bill, Pop. This is the threat about the bill. They send it to scare you into calling. You see this number up in the corner?" He tapped it. "That's the parcel. That's all the house is to them. Not Mama's roses, not 31 years on the line, a number on a list." Andre put his glasses back on and leaned over the table. For the first time in months, the page held still under his eyes, because someone was walking him through it a line at a time, the way Andre himself used to walk a new driver through the route. "This stop fills at 6:10. This one you don't trust the schedule on. Slow down here. And this one." Isaiah pulled the second letter to the top and ran a finger under a sentence near the middle. "Read it close. It says they can sell the lien. Can. It doesn't say will. There's a whole road between can and will, and they don't draw it for you, because the people who make money off these would rather you thought the two words meant the same thing." He looked up. "They don't. I've stood on the wrong end of can a lot of times. There's always a road." It was not as hopeless as the language made it sound. It rarely is. That was the cruelty of the language, and the mercy underneath it, once you got the language out of the way. 2 things Isaiah found: that the tired woman behind the glass had not had the 50 minutes to walk an old man through. The first was that his father, at 67, had been eligible for years for the homestead exemption. A real thing, a standing program in Ohio that lowers the taxable value of a home for owners 65 and older, and brings the yearly bill down. Andre had never applied. No one had ever told him plainly that he could. The bill that had crept up on him while he wasn't watching had been higher than it ever needed to be, every single year, because a man grieving and waiting does not read the back of the pamphlet. The second was that the county did not actually want the house. The county wanted the money, and counties in Ohio will, if you sit down with them, before the lien is sold, set up a delinquent tax payment plan. A written agreement that stops the clock, takes the parcel off the sale list, and lets a person clear the back balance in installments a pension can carry. $3,140 was a wall when you had to climb it in one jump. It was a staircase when somebody showed you it had steps. "You don't pay this all at once," Isaiah said. "You sign the plan. It comes off the sale list the day you sign, and we file the exemption so the new bills are lower, so this never happens to you again." And the back of it," Andre said. "The 3,000. You've got 2,700 in a button box," his son said, and there was something in his face that was almost a smile and almost not, "that you've been refusing to spend for 9 years because you wouldn't admit who it came from." He put his hand flat on the cigar box. "It came from me, Pop. It was always coming back to you. Spend it, and I cover the rest." Not as a handout. As 9 years of a son who should have been putting something in this house, and wasn't. Andre shook his head, the old reflex, his mother's rule rising up in him before he could think. "I don't take what I haven't earned. You know that. Your grandmother—" "You earned this," Isaiah said, and his voice was steady, a man's voice. "You earned it the first night you turned that light on. And you earned it the 900th, and you earned it every March you couldn't bring yourself to spend my $300, because spending it meant you'd stopped waiting for me. You don't get to call that charity. That's the most earned thing I ever saw. And the old man could not argue with that, because it was true, and because the boy he had once told would never amount to anything was sitting at his kitchen table at sunrise, having just saved his house not with money, but with the one thing his father had said he didn't have: responsibility. The patience to read the hard letter all the way to the bottom. Andre had been wrong 9 years ago in the cruelest way a father can be wrong. His son had become exactly the man he'd accused him of being unable to become. The accusation and the proof of its falseness were sitting in the same chair. They drove downtown the following Tuesday, the two of them, in Isaiah's truck because the Buick's heater had quit. Andre noticed that on the way down. His son was driving him. There had been a time, a long time, when it was the other way around, when a small boy rode shotgun on Saturday mornings while his father ran the routes the city didn't pay for, and now a grown man drove his father down Carnegie with both hands on the wheel and the radio low, and Andre looked out the window so his son wouldn't see what that did to him. The county building was the same one. The line was the same line, 40-50 people deep, folding chairs along one wall for the ones who couldn't stand that long. They took two. Isaiah had the folder on his knee, everything in order, tabbed. The deed, the letters, the proof of age, the pension statement that showed exactly what a man could carry per month, and not $1 more. They waited an hour and 10 minutes. Andre watched the clock and thought about how many times in his life he had been the one behind a window, the one with the schedule, the one a tired person needed something from, and he hoped he had been kind on the days it counted. When the number came up, it was a different clerk, a young man this time, but the glass was the same glass. Isaiah leaned to the speaker hole and did not start with the trouble. He started with the question. We're here to file a homestead exemption for my father. He's 67, owner-occupied. This is his only home. And to set up a delinquent tax payment plan on the back balance before the parcel goes to a lien sale. Can we do both today? The clerk looked at the folder, and then he looked at Isaiah, the way people look when someone has walked up to the window already knowing the names of the doors. You can do both today, he said. It took 40 minutes. The exemption form signed, the income lines filled. And then the agreement that mattered most. The written plan that took the $3,140 and broke it into something a $1,900 pension could carry. A piece at a time. With the clock stopped the moment the ink dried, the clerk turned the screen partway so they could see it. He typed. He clicked something. Okay, he said. That parcel's off the sale list as of this morning. Andre sat very still. 5 seconds. He had braced for this trip the way you brace for a funeral, and instead, a tired young man behind glass had typed 4 sentences and handed his whole life back to him across a counter. And the thing he felt was not relief so much as a kind of grief at how simple it had turned out to be, how close he had come to losing everything over a road nobody had shown him. He signed where the clerk pointed. His hand was steady now. He printed his name under the signature the way his mother had taught him, all the letters, so there could be no mistaking who had stood here and kept his house. In the elevator down, Isaiah said, "You okay, Pop?" "That's it?" Andre said. 9 years I've been afraid of that building, and that's all it was? That's all it ever was, his son said. They just don't tell you. You have to already know. 3 counties over, Halstead Leon Holdings adjusted a model in a spreadsheet and never knew the difference, because the patience of old men who can't pay is only profitable when no one shows the old men the staircase, the spest. Isaiah did not go back to Columbus. He told his father a week later, over Sunday plates, that he was staying. He'd thought he was coming up for a weekend. He'd packed for a weekend. But a man who has spent 9 years learning that he can leave does not have to keep proving it, and the only thing in Columbus was a shop that had finished doing for him what it was put in his life to do. Carl gave me a place to stand back up, Isaiah said. He'd be the first one to tell me a place isn't where you stand, it's who you stand it up for. Andre did not trust his voice, so he just nodded and cut another piece of pie and slid it onto his son's plate without being asked, which was its own whole sentence. He found a buyer for Carl's shop who would keep Carl's name on the wall, and he took the money and he opened a bay on the east side, 3 blocks from Mount Carmel, in a shuttered garage on Huff that had been dark since before he left. The first day the new sign went up, Andre drove the Buick over with the heater, finally fixed, and stood across the street and read his son's name on the front of a building, painted clean, Whitaker under it in letters a foot tall. He thought about Carl, a man he'd never met, who had given a drifting stranger a bay and a name on a wall and a reason. He thought about his own mother and her cardboard suitcase and the address inked on her wrist so she wouldn't lose her way north. He thought a name on a wall is a thing this family had been chasing for 3 generations. And here it was, in his son's hand, on his own street. He did not cross to say any of that. He just read it twice and got back in the car. He fixed the gutter on the house on Crandall for the first weekend, and he pruned his mother's rose bush back to where it would bloom again. And on the second Sunday of the month, the way his mother used to, Isaiah carried a sweet potato 2 doors down to Miss Ruthie, who took it with both hands and looked at him a long time and said, "I knew that light wasn't for nothing. Your daddy left it on for you all them years and you went and turned out to be worth it. Don't you make a liar out of him now?" "No, ma'am," Isaiah said. The shop did all right. More than all right. Because Isaiah had learned something in 9 years of being on the wrong side of the language himself, and he ran his bay by a rule he didn't advertise. He read people the hard. A woman came in that first spring, a widow named Mrs. Corrine Boyd. With an old Mercury her husband had left her, and a stack of paper she didn't understand, and a payment book that said she owed more than the car was worth, and a tone of voice that said she'd already decided she was going to lose it the way she'd lost everything else that year. Isaiah cleaned his hands and sat her down at the little table by the register and asked to see the paper. He read it the way he'd read father's letters, one system at a time out loud, and about halfway down the second page he stopped and he read a line again, and he set it flat on the table and turned it so she could see. "Miss Boyd," he said. He said, "You don't owe what they're telling you you owe. This loan was in your husband's name, and there's an insurance on it, right here. That's supposed to clear it when the borrower passes. They didn't tell you that. They've been billing you for 11 months on a debt that was paid the day he died." He spent an hour with her that she did not pay for, and he wrote down the numbers she needed to call and the words she needed to say, and he made a copy of the page and circled the line. And when she left, she was holding the title to a car she'd thought she was about to lose, and she had to stop on the sidewalk a minute before she could drive it. It went like that. A young man 2 payments behind on a repair he couldn't afford the work done, and a plan to clear it that didn't break him. A grandmother got walked through the same homestead exemption that had saved the house on Crandall, because Isaiah had learned it once and never let himself forget it. He kept a folder by the register, plain manila, and in it were the things working people are almost never shown: the exemptions, the payment plans, the insurance lines, the whole quiet architecture of staircases hidden inside walls, and he made copies, and he handed them across the counter with the keys. Because somebody, once, on a cold gray morning in a kitchen on Crandall Avenue, had read him the letters all the way to the bottom, and taught him the difference between a wall and a stair. And Andre, who had a lot of mornings now with nowhere he had to be, took to sitting in the chair by that register 2 or 3 days a week. He didn't fix cars, but he knew how to talk to people who were scared because he had been scared, and he had spent 31 years learning the names of strangers on a bus. So he'd pour the coffee and learn the name and say good morning the way his mother taught him. And when somebody came in stiff with the shame of not understanding their own paperwork, it was often the old man in the chair who put them at ease enough to lay it on the table. He never charged for that either. There is no charge for it. It was just the thing his mother had sent him into the world able to do, free of charge, and it had taken him 67 years, and one truck in the dark to understand it was a kind of light too. And every night on the house on Crandall, the porch light stayed on, not a vigil now. Just a light a son left on for a father who liked to know it was there, the two of them under the same roof again, the radio back on in the kitchen, gospel low in the mornings the way Renee had kept it. Andre never took down the cigar box. The money orders were spent, gone into the house that held them both, but he kept the empty box on the shelf where Renee's buttons used to live. Because some boxes are worth keeping for what they once carried. One night that first summer the bulb burned out. Andre heard the porch go dark from the kitchen the way you hear a clock stop, by the absence, and he was halfway to the drawer for the spare before he caught himself, because for 9 years that walk had been his alone. But Isaiah was already up. "I got it, Pop." And Andre stood in the kitchen doorway and watched his son go out onto the porch in the warm dark and reach up and turn the dead bulb out and screw the spare in, the way Andre had done 100 times for a man who never saw him do it, and the light came on, soft and yellow, and lit his son's face from above. Isaiah stood under it a second longer than the job required. Then he came in and put the burned-out bulb on the counter and said he'd get more at the corner store tomorrow, 2 of them, so there'd always be a spare. Andre said that was how he'd always done it. Isaiah said he knew. He said he'd been counting on it from 4 hours away for a long time. They never made a speech about any of it. That was not how the men in that family worked. But the light stayed on, and now there were 2 of them to keep it on, and a spare always in the drawer. And that was the whole sermon, said the only way they knew how to say it. If this story made you think of a door you've been afraid to knock on or a light somebody might still be leaving on for you, sit with that a minute before you scroll on. Here is the question I keep turning over, and I don't have a clean answer. Andre's worst sentence and his 9-year vigil came from the same man, the same love handled 2 different ways. The son forgave the sentence because the light outlasted it. But the light only got the chance to outlast it because Isaiah came back at all. So whose move was it, really? The father who kept faith without proof it would ever be seen, or the son who finally had to be the one to cross the street? When the silence between 2 people has gone on 9 years, who is supposed to break it first? Leave your answer below. I'd like to know how you'd have called it.